It's perfectly obvious to him what the end game was going to be. But while he was still here and still capable, he did what he always did. He worked hard and he was brilliant.
The Princess of Wales has given a warning of the dangers of growing prejudice against people with AIDS.
It was a very difficult time. I was a very junior doctor, so I was carrying out tasks at the order of my consultant. And it was very hard to get things done, because the minute you said, I've got an HIV positive patient, you could hear the person sighing at the other end of the phone, and then suddenly there would be no beds. And it was the same sometimes for investigations, if you needed a bronchoscopy, a test to look in the lungs. And I remember very clearly being young, frightened, but feeling like I had to put an armor on, roll my sleeves up and go into battle. And that was to get a CT scan, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it now, but it literally was like that.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug.
When Richard was in hospital, he was in there for a year, I was there every day with him. You start to notice what's going on in the ward. It suddenly hits, even nurses running somewhere, and you know what was happening. And people were dying quickly, and Joe Public didn't really know. I lost 95% of my friends.
Sometimes I get to feeling I was back in the old days, long ago.
I think those were the days of our lives, was very poignant because of the video, because that was the last video Freddie did.
The days were endless, we were crazy.
I think Roger Taylor wrote that. That was the last video he could do because he couldn't stand up for long. And he was in great pain.
I just don't know. The rest of my life.
Everybody around us that, worked with us, some of them hadn't seen Freddie for a while. They were very visibly shocked.
Those were the days.
He could barely stand then, so that was a very brave thing to do. But he wanted to do it, and do it he did.
He just looked very thin and gaunt, and the hollows seemed a bit more deeper. He knew what he was facing, and he knew what he was looking at in the mirror.
I still love you.
It's a nice little sign-off at the end, I thought was very moving.
I still love you.
It was like a goodbye at the end,
I remember he said, darling, when I can't sing anymore, then I'll die. I'll drop dead. That's it. And I think when he'd finished and he'd sung as much as he could sing, he withdrew and he got ready to die.
The documentary was AIDS Updates. It was a series of 5 10-minute programs over a week.
I cry my eyes out and, I just get hold of Stuart and I say, Stuart, I just can't cope.
The idea of it was to dispel the myths. Richard was there straight away, he said, yes, we'll do it.
I've made out a will. I've spoken to Stuart about funeral arrangements and how I want, basically how I want my funeral.
He almost caught me out. You could smoke in the corridors of the hospitals. I was having a crafty cigarette. And I heard somebody shout, Stuart! And I dropped the cigarette, ran in there. I held him, but his head was here, and I said, baby, let go. And he did. And I felt his breath, his last breath.
The last 2 weeks of Freddie's life, there was the same people in Garden Lodge. There was Freddie, Jim, Joe Finelli, and myself. Joe Finelli was diagnosed with HIV. Jim was diagnosed with HIV. He had already made the decision he would have no more drugs that were keeping him alive. The only thing that he would take would be painkillers. And for those last 2 weeks, he slowly let go.
There was a huge press of media surrounding the house, even photographing the groceries in the back of the car, and, it was all pretty sick, actually. I think I tried to run somebody over and failed.
My mum visited him more time than Dad. I don't think Dad could take it because he looked like a skeleton towards the end. And I remember very clearly my dad was reading one of the many articles and tears were pouring down his face onto the newspaper. And he said, "This should have been me instead of Freddie." I remember that so clearly. It was so sad.
And now the shipping forecast. There are warnings of gales in Thames, Dover, White, Portland, Plymouth and...
Joe called me, I think, at about 5:30 in the morning, and Freddie had basically gone into a coma. So we called the doctor, and he made Freddie sort of comfortable. The doctor had literally just left the house, and we went up. And Freddie had moved, you could see he had moved a bit. And as we were changing his T-shirt, we just looked and saw his chest had stopped moving.
A day after revealing to the world that he had AIDS, the rock star Freddie Mercury has died.
The day he died, we spent the whole night at my house in Kensington at the time. The three of us just trying to make sense of it, and then it came up on the news in the early morning.
Good morning from Sarah and me. You're watching the BBC's Breakfast News. It's 6:30. The headlines this morning, Monday, the 25th of November.
Maybe it shouldn't have been, but it was an awful shock. And Roger and John and myself got together, sat, kind of had a cup of tea, not knowing what to say, and then we put the TV on.
The pop star Freddie Mercury died last night in London.
We almost stopped breathing because that's when we believed that it had actually happened. The fact that it was on the news made it real.
I didn't really see much of Jim. I think not being one that lived his life in the public eye, didn't want any of that, so withdrew.
The lead singer with Queen, aged 45, had announced on Saturday he was suffering from AIDS.
It was announced before he died, but he didn't want to go through the misery of being the object of pity or scrutiny, when you're that sick. So he did announce it, and within 24 hours he was gone. So I think that was probably perfect timing. Bloody good move, I thought.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Rolling?
Running.
Freddie Mercury was an incredible, innovative singer and frontman for a band. He was a very dear friend of mine, and it was a privilege to have known him for some of his life.
The press was full of what a wonderful performer Freddie was, what amazing music he wrote. Everybody had been saying such wonderful things, nice things. How very quickly that changed.
The press were pretty shitty, as they normally were.
Freddie dying of AIDS, Freddie sleeping around, so he got what he deserved.
Yeah, I wouldn't single anybody out, except maybe the Sun, I think, were particularly awful about it.
There was some nice press, there were some people who were very nice, but there were people who were unbelievably unsympathetic.
730,000 people using the Help AIDS line last year. Those people seeking help and advice. We've got to be able to give it in school, but we've got to be able to give it as part of a total picture so that we don't have a great hoo-ha when Freddie Mercury died, because he had such a bizarre and, in my view, quite unacceptable lifestyle.
There was this talk of, well, you know, he was gay, he kind of deserved it, you know, he lived that kind of promiscuous lifestyle. It was going to happen, you know, and we thought, oh my God, you people have no idea of what this disease really is. And obviously no feeling about the morality of what you're saying.
Roger Taylor and Brian May are with us. The death of Freddie Mercury.
Brian and I decided to say something on breakfast TV or something.
It's been quite distressing to read some of the reports in the press.
Not quite sure what we want to do. I was just to say that, look, this press is disgusting, really. What a terrible attitude. And there we were, stuck with Paul Daniels.
Paul Daniels is listening here. Were you a fan of Queen and of Freddie Mercury?
Well, no, because
We were in a bit of a daze, to be honest. It hit us very hard. We were very angry. And we had to stick up for our friend, you know, our best friend.
Freddie made one crucial decision before he died, which was to announce the fact that he did have AIDS, which was a very brave and I think well-timed act on his part, because it gave us and those close to us a kind of weapon to talk about AIDS. You know, it would have been very easy for him to put on his death certificate pneumonia, you know, which he knew, and it could have perhaps sidestepped the whole thing. The fact that he announced it and said, look, I've got this, and there was no shame to that, I think is very important, because there shouldn't be from this point, or not from any point, any stigma to having this disease. It's nothing to do with, you know, somebody did something wrong, he's being punished. That's got to go. It has to go, you know. It's everybody's problem now.
At that point, we thought we're not going to let Freddie be perceived in history as a victim or as someone who threw himself in front of a train. And if we're going to talk about AIDS, we should bring everything out into the open. Freddie isn't the only person who's being vilified before and after his death by people who think that AIDS is some kind of revenge against gay people.
Is this the real life?
I felt that it was a waste of a lovely, talented life.
Is this just fantasy?
But also for those people who died in the same period as Freddie. It was such a bad stigma and the shame behind it all that a lot of families didn't understand.
Caught in a landslide, no escape from
People died on their own, which I thought is such a shame.
Open your eyes.
Queen is to re-release its best-known hit Bohemian Rhapsody next month, with the proceeds going to an AIDS charity.
You have doubts about everything. We think, you know, are we capitalising on his death? Is this maybe a tasteless thing to do? And we thought, no, we put it out and all the profits will go to charity.
I think one of the results of his life can be that people have a different attitude to people being gay. I really hope so. He is a guy who was strong, who was incredibly talented, quite magnificent in every way you can think of. And he was gay and was quite public about it. So I don't think anyone can ever quite feel the same about that anymore. I mean, and it's time, God knows, you know.
Too late. My time has come.
Obviously, the band was effectively finished at that point. So I remember thinking, well, what can we do?
Goodbye, everybody.
Well, we could have a concert to honour our friend. And I became sort of fixated with the idea of giving him a hell of a send-off. And at the same time, promoting awareness about HIV/AIDS. I remember showing Brian, look, I reckon we can get this lot here, you know, all these great artists. He said, well, I don't know. I didn't really believe in it, I think, at first. And he said, well, if you can get that lot, I'm in.